I'm scared. The world is a changing place. Nearly everyone that you know walks around with a supercomputer in their pocket every day. My dog has a bowl that automatically feeds him. And the dang old cars are driving themselves. With all this wacky technology out there, it's only a matter of time before our beloved tube amps are gone. So today, let's hold a funeral and share a moment of silence because our modelers have headphone outputs. Let's do it. All right, guys, hope that you are doing so well that it makes you physically uncomfortable today. If this is your first time here at my channel, my name is Kyle and welcome to Belligerent Studios. What I typically do is I take all sorts of awesome high gain related guitar equipment, record it with a simple setup, and I give you the unprocessed audio on your end. But today, we're gonna have a little chat with Dad. It's time that we talk about the birds and the bees. Birds being amplifier modelers and plugins, and bees being our beloved tube amps. There's absolutely nothing sexual about this conversation, and that analogy doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Thanks for tuning in. All right, guys, setting aside my propensity for extreme levels of stupidity, this conversation is actually going to be based around whether or not tube amps are actually dying. And no, I'm not talking about magic smoke that comes out of the back of vintage Marshall amplifiers. So obviously this is a discussion that has been going on since the early 2000s when the first modelers really started to gain traction, they started to get popular, and people started making all sorts of wild claims about them. Cue the Line 6 Pod and Kemper meme guy. Pretty much since the advent of digital modelers, people have been saying that tube amps are not long for this world. And you know what? People might be right about that. In the last 20 years, big, heavy amplifiers have gone from an absolute necessity if you're playing in any sort of live band situation to a piece of equipment that people don't even consider buying these days. And you may think that that sounds crazy, but I've talked to multiple younger guitarists who have never even plugged into a real amplifier. Their entire guitar experience has been with plugins and modelers. And while you and I find that extremely depressing for both them and for the state of guitar equipment, they don't care at all. These younger players are getting absolutely everything they need from plugins and modelers, and let's be honest, if you're young enough that you still live with your parents or if you live with other people, the modelers and plugins do things that tube amp owners really could only dream of, or have to buy very expensive secondary equipment in order to make that possible. Now, I'm talking about silent playing and recording. I completely missed my finger there. And on top of those at-home capabilities, modelers have the ability to be plugged directly into the PA, completely negating the need for large speaker cabs and large and loud amplifiers. So with that being said, it is true. You really don't need an amplifier to be even a gigging, even a touring guitarist these days. They're just not necessary anymore. And frankly, more and more people in touring bands, big touring bands, are just straight up going the way of modeling. It's easier to transport, it's cheaper, it's easier to have backup units, it's more reliable and consistent on stage. I mean, there are just a ton of benefits to it. Now, this probably sounds like I'm sitting here about to tell you that I'm switching over to digital modeling and selling all of my tube amps, but come on, guys. You know me better than that. I will forever and always be a tube amp through a full stack type of guy. So don't worry, my tube amps aren't going anywhere just because I am finally starting to see the light of digital guitar equipment. So there are a couple of reasons that I felt the need to talk about this topic here on the channel. And the first reason is because my band recently played a fly date in Costa Rica. And even though I played drums in this band, I actually used this, my Quad Cortex, in order to outfit my guitarist and my bassist with a good sounding portable rig. And I gotta tell you guys, I am beyond impressed with what the Quad Cortex is capable of. I was able to create 2 guitar rigs on this, both with their own separate outputs, as well as a bass rig on here. So technically there was 2 guitar rigs and one bass rig and enough ins and outs that my guitarist and my bassist could plug into those and then send the outputs to respective power amplifiers and basically mimic the type of setup that we would use with real tube amplifiers here at home. Now, I have been a fan of the Quad Cortex since it was released. I think that this is the most intuitive and easy to use modeler and amp capturing device on the market. I know that there are a lot of people who have a lot of things to say about these things, but for the use case that I wanted to use it for, which is capturing my own amplifiers and being able to take them on the road with me, I don't know why I'm holding up two fingers, that was one thing. This thing performs honestly flawlessly. But with that being said, I never personally have had the opportunity to use this in a band situation before. So when I found out we were flying to Costa Rica, I was actually really excited to use this and see how it would perform. And honestly, it blew away every expectation that I had. It was phenomenal. We had a ton of people coming up to us after the show asking about the guitar rig, taking pictures of the Quad Cortex because they'd never seen one in person before. Like, there were multiple people in the crowd who were really, really interested in this because they said that we were the best sounding band of the night and we were the only band that was using a modeler. So go figure. So really, that was the first thing that kind of got me thinking about this topic in general. But the second thing was kind of more of an observation related to my channel. And that observation is something that I shared with you guys on a live stream not that long ago. And it is basically that views on physical amplifier videos that I do that used to be the bread and butter of my channel are now some of the lowest performing videos on the channel. And there are a number of reasons for that. I'm falling off hard. I say that as a joke, but it's probably true. But for real, the economy and some of the things going on in the world have people not really looking into big ticket purchases like a large heavy tube amplifier. Also, interest in guitar playing is down from the big old vid boom of 2020, 2021. And with that interest being down, the prices have not gone down on a lot of those items. If you guys were into guitar equipment before the vid boom, then you will remember how insane some of the pricing got on used guitar amplifiers during that time. And we kind of all just thought like, hey, maybe it's just because there's a huge boom in people picking up the guitar during these crazy times, as well as the cash influx that we were getting from the good old government. And those two things combined are kind of creating just a wild buying and selling market. And of course, it's much more nuanced than just that, but those are kind of like the main points. And a lot of us thought that those prices would kind of readjust and come back down to reality after things settled down. Well, things have settled down in that respect, but the prices haven't really gone back down. Some items like the Peavey Blockletter 5150 have returned to more of a normal point. I mean, there was a point in 2021, 2022 where I could sell a Blockletter 5150 for $1,800. That is insane. They are not that hard to come by, guys. I've had at least 20 of them over the past 10 years. They're not hard to track down. There is nothing rare about them. But that did not stop people from inflating those prices through the roof and into the friggin' atmosphere. But within the last 6 to 8 months, I've noticed that those prices have fallen pretty significantly. I'd say the average Blockletter 5150 price is somewhere around $1,000 now, which is still quite a bit more than the $500 to $600 that they went for in 2018 or 2019, but it is still significantly less than $1,800. So there are a few different pieces of equipment that basically went way up, came back down to reality a little bit, but there are a lot of pieces of equipment that just stayed up. The first one that comes to mind are 2-channel dual rectifiers and triple rectifiers. Those used to be amps that I would pick up for $700 all day long on the used market in 2018 and 2019. And frankly, those amplifiers would sit when I would try to sell them for $900 or $1,000. Like, the market for rectifiers was just, it was so easy to get your hands on one for not a lot of money for quite a long time. But as you are probably well aware, those prices went also insane, to the point where a 2-channel dual rectifier or triple rectifier is selling between $1,800 and $2,000 pretty regularly these days. That's nuts. And those prices definitely do not seem to be creeping back down whatsoever. In fact, they've only gone up. So with people having now less expendable income because of the state of the economy, as well as us not getting insane checks every week or being handed lump sum stimulus checks, on top of the insane amounts of inflation we've experienced over the past few years, means that a lot less people have money to spend on things like music equipment, and in particular, an old technology that is kind of slowly but surely fading with popularity and utility with every year that passes. Now listen, I'm not happy about it. I would rather there be more interest in tube amps, because the more interest there is, the better the market is. The better the market is, the more companies can afford to put time, energy, R&D budget into creating new amplifiers. So there's a whole snowball effect that happens because of this. So with cost being a prohibitive factor, as well as space being a prohibitive factor, because let's face it, some people don't even have enough room in their living space for a half stack or even like a 212 cab and head combo. That's just another thing that makes modelers more attractive, because they're getting smaller and smaller all the time. And when it comes to cost, there's really no comparison between a new tube amp and a new modeler. Now, of course, something like the Quad Cortex is gonna run you pretty close to $2,000 when it's all said and done after taxes, and that is definitely way out of some people's budgets, but it has never, ever been a better time to be a guitarist, especially when it comes to modeling units, because there are all sorts of companies out there that are making much more budget-minded gear, and surprisingly, most of it doesn't suck. Now, of course, when sticking with the more known and established brands in the space, like Neural, you've obviously got a new option in the Nano Cortex to be able to enter this ecosystem for much, much less. This is $550 as opposed to $1,650. That's a pretty significant price difference. And when the Nano Cortex came out, the first thing that I said is anybody can now afford to jump into the Neural ecosystem because of this. And of course, Headrush and Line 6, like pretty much every company has their stripped down version of their bigger unit. But there are also a bunch of new companies that have come along in the past 10 years that have really started to bring the price of entry down on the digital guitar landscape. You can jump into something like the Sonicake Matribox 2 for less than $300, and this has literally everything that you're gonna need. It has excellent build quality, and the modeling in it is pretty good. Is it as good as something like Neural or Line 6? Not quite, but it is definitely good enough that you can use this and get away with it. And anybody that isn't an absolute tone nerd will never know that you used an Amazon guitar modeler for your tones. Or you could go even cheaper, much like you do when you're hiring an escort service, and go with something like the Hot Tone Ampero Mini. This is actually one of my favorite modelers, and it is the cheapest modeler that I own. This has a touchscreen interface. It's got all sorts of awesome modeling options built into it. It has the ability to split the signal going out so you can put it into a power amp and cab and into the front of the house at the same time. And overall, it's just a really intuitive and easy to use unit that I was super impressed with when I did the demo of it on my video channel. It's a video channel. So all of those pros filling up the column for the digital modeling amplifier solutions. What is really left to be put into the pro column of tube amplifiers? Well, quite a bit if you ask me. First and foremost, for me, at the very top of the list, nothing will ever replace the feeling of cranking a tube amp through a 412 cab or through a full stack, and it literally being a full body experience. If you have ever cranked an amp and stood in front of it, you will know, especially certain amplifiers, some of them just hit you right in the chest. They literally shake you to your core in like the best way possible. And while you can somewhat replicate that by sending a modeler through a power amp into a cabinet, it's just never quite the same as playing the actual tube amp through the cabinet. And I think that pretty much anybody that watches my channel is going to agree with that, because I know that I have a lot of people here. This channel started off by me reviewing old tube amps and basically shedding light on some of the old offerings out there that people didn't really know that much about. And it turned out that there were a lot more people out there interested in that than I originally thought. So that visceral experience of just plugging in and turning it up and literally feeling it, like nothing will ever replace that for me. And that is the primary version of the reason, words are really difficult for me today, that I will always use a real guitar amp and cabinet rig anytime that I have the ability to do so. There is also the feel factor, which frankly, when it comes to the modeling and the digital stuff, seems to be the hardest thing for them to get right. If you have ever talked to a tube amp guy about modeling, I can pretty much guarantee you that one of the first things that they bring up on why they don't want to use a modeler is because the feel is just not there. Now, of course, that has gotten better over the years with the modeling improving and the ability to capture your own amplifiers with something like the Quad Cortex. That simulated feel is getting closer, but It's still not 100%, and who knows if it'll ever be 100%. I would assume with the advances in technology that we'll get there sooner than later, but that's no guarantee, and there really is nothing like the feel, especially of a tube amplifier in the room. Something that always sticks with me is I listen to the Tone Talk podcast with Dave Friedman and Mark Huzansky all the time, and anytime that they talk about modeling, one of the things that they bring up that the person using modelers is missing out on is the ability to actually play the amp. Now you're probably asking, what does that even mean? Well, guess what? I'm gonna tell you. There is a marked difference between plugging directly into a plug-in and playing on headphones or playing through studio monitors, or even something like playing a modeler into an FR speaker when compared to playing an amp in the room. And that's because amplifiers, due to the way that they are manufactured, due to the way that they're wired, have a certain reactance with the guitar that is in your hands when you're in the same room. The guitar feeds back, the amp picks up some of the vibrations and some of the things that are happening in the room, and it kind of actually is able to recreate that, and a lot of players are able to use that and turn it into either something musical or something as far as utility, basically feeding back and creating ambient sounds if they're trying to go for that. Things along those lines that you just can't really recreate if you're playing a modeler, especially if you're playing on headphones. It's not gonna happen. And that is a huge part of the fun of playing a tube amplifier loud in the room. And on top of all that, one of the things that I think a lot of people consider a detriment when it comes to analog gear is the actual variance in two identical units and how the sound is affected because of the variance brought on by manufacturing tolerances or changes in manufacturing or changes in small parts. Like, there is a big reason why something like a Rev F dual rectifier is so much more sought after than a Rev G, and that's because you cannot physically build a Rev F dual rectifier like you could when they were new. Some of those parts are not available anymore. They can't manufacture the transformers the same way, which is a big part of it. So you will never literally have the ability to create a one-for-one replica or reissue of something like a Rev F dual rectifier because the parts simply don't exist and they never will. And for me, as somebody who is a huge tone nerd who's constantly going through different amps and trying stuff out all the time, I actually really like that there's kind of like a variance in some of the models. I am definitely the type of person that likes to sit down and compare two like things and just kind of see how they compare and contrast, see which one I like better or suits me better in that moment. I don't know why, I've just always been a nerd like that, and that type of stuff is like really, really fun for me. And what I have noticed over the years as somebody who goes through a lot of the same amps at the same time is you tend to find special amplifiers that sound just a little bit better or just a little bit different, and there's something about that difference that makes it truly special. I just realized I'm just doing this, so go ahead and take that out of context. So for an example, over the years, I've gone through so many rectifiers, and I even made a video about how no two rectifiers sound the same. Like the tolerances that are within those amplifiers with all the components that go into them, I've never had two rectifiers that sound identical when sitting them next to each other and playing them back to back. I've never experienced it. And with that being said, sometimes you get whatever you want to call it, just the unicorn amplifier, you get the amplifier with the magic ratios of all the components and everything. Some amplifiers just sound naturally better than others, even though they're identical amplifiers that could have even been manufactured on the same day at the same time. Every now and then, you just get one of those amplifiers that just has it. It's got the sauce, it fucks harder than the other. And when it comes to modelers, you're never really gonna get that experience. Now, whether you want that experience or not, two different things, and I totally understand if you don't. You are a sane person, and I wish I could be like you. So with those things being said, I could continue to go on and on about what I love about tube amps and why I'll always be a tube amp guy over a modeler guy, but I really wanna know what you guys have to think. What? I really wanna know what you guys have to say about the subject. I literally live and breathe guitar gear. It is now my full-time job to kind of be on top of this stuff, to be testing new products, and I make it a point to really keep up with what's going on with the industry as well as what's going on with the average player. That's why I stay up to date in all the guitar forums and all the guitar groups on Facebook. It's because I really like to track the trends and kind of see what's going on. And when I started the channel in late 2020, tube amps were huge at the time. There was just a huge boom, a huge resurgence in interest in tube amplifiers. there was a massive community around them that was just like constantly active. Every day I would go online and there would be a ton of new threads or a ton of new posts in these Facebook groups about amplifiers, asking questions about old amplifiers that there weren't very good clips on, which is essentially what led me to starting this channel in the first place, and I'm so glad that I did. And honestly, it was just a really great, really fun time to be a tone nerd on the internet. But unfortunately, that resurgence has not only died, but it has faded out really, really heavily. A lot of the new people that came in and were excited about all this stuff kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. All that extra time and that extra money that they had a few years ago is no longer there. And therefore, that interest that they had in guitar because of that extra free time and that extra expendable income has gone out the door with those things as well. So I really think that that plays a huge role in the, I guess, lack of interest comparatively in tube amps now versus just a few years ago. But I want to hear from you guys. Do you guys think that tube amps are dying? Do you think that they're on the way out? Obviously, they're a very old technology that hasn't really received a whole lot of improvements over the past 60 years. And even though there is a huge demographic still here that love tube amplifiers, a lot of those people are older, and as they age out of playing guitar, tube amp users will become the minority and the modeling guys will become the majority. So with that being said, what do you guys think about the state of tube amplifiers now? What do you guys think the state of tube amplifiers will be 20 years from now? Sound off in the comments because I'm genuinely curious to hear what you guys have to say. And let's be honest, I'm just kind of hoping that you guys can restore a little bit of my faith in the guitar playing community and tell me that I'm wrong and that tube amps are definitely not dying and I'm just a delusional bald weirdo with crooked nostrils. So with that being said, guys, I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you got something out of this conversation. There wasn't really a point that I was making, essentially. I was just kind of talking, just having a conversation about some of the things that I've noticed here recently. And hopefully something that I said resonated with you and you didn't just watch a 15-minute video of me rambling for no reason. As always, if you want to help the channel, down below in the description of this video are all my affiliate links with Sweetwater, Guitar Center, and Zounds. So if you guys want to help the channel out, you guys are looking to buy that next new tube amp, hitting those affiliate links goes a long way in helping this channel grow, and it allows me to do more fun, cool stuff that actually involves playing guitar and not talking to a camera. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Kyle here again. I'm gonna go play a tube amp.